Good day, everyone. I'm Christopher Phekni, and this presentation examines Deil Wright's overlapping model of intergovernmental relations and its importance within modern public administration. Wright's frameworks explain how federal, state, and local government operate through shared authority, collaboration, and coordinated governance rather than strict separation of powers. This presentation will explore the theoretical foundations, strengths, challenges, and modern applications of intergovernmental collaboration. Biblical principles such as stewardship, unity, accountability, and ethical leadership guide effective governance. Ecclesiastes 4:9 reminds us that two are better than one because collaboration strengthens outcomes and improves services to communities. Effective leadership and public administration depends upon cooperation, trust, accountability, communication, ethical responsibility, and collective problem solving. Good day, everyone. Before we begin discussing Wright's overlapping model of intergovernmental relations, I would like to provide a brief overview of the presentation. This presentation examines how governments interact and collaborate to address increasingly complex public challenges. We will begin with a discussion of intergovernmental relations and the role they play within the federal system. Understanding these relationships is important because public administrators rarely operate within a single level of government. Instead, they work in environments where authority, resources, and responsibility are shared. Next, I will introduce the Deil Wright overlapping model and explain why it is represented a significant shift from traditional views of federalism. We will then examine the theoretical foundations that support the model and explore how intergovernmental relations function in practice through negotiation, cooperation, and shared decision making. This presentation will evaluate the strength and weakness of the model. While the overlapping approach promotes collaboration and flexibility, it can create challenges related to accountability, jurisdictional conflict, and administrative complexity. Finally, I will discuss the contemporary application of the model and conclude with a brief biblical perspective on cooperation, stewardship, and public service. Together, these topics will demonstrate why Wright's model remains highly relevant to the public for public administrators and local government managers operating in today's interconnected policy environment. To understand Wright's overlapping model, we first need to understand the concept of intergovernmental relations, or IGR. At its core, IGR is rooted in federalism, which distributes authority among federal, state, and local governments. Traditionally, these levels of government were viewed as having separate responsibilities and clearly defined areas of authority. However, public administration has changed significantly over time. Today's policy challenges, such as public health emergencies, disaster response, infrastructure development, and environmental protection, rarely fit neatly within a single jurisdiction. As a result, government must work together more frequently than in the past. Wright recognized this reality and argued that government relationships are better understood as interconnected rather than separated. According to Agronoff and Clicks, modern governance is characterized by interactions, shared authority, and mutual dependence among governmental units. Christensen and League similarly observed that contemporary federalism increasingly relies on cross-level collaboration to avoid complex public issues. This collaboration perspective is reflected in the concept of fiscal federalism. Oates explained that effective public service delivery often requires governments to share financial resources and administrative responsibilities. Likewise, Frederickson and colleagues emphasize that modern public administration depends heavily on networks, partnerships, and collaborative governance arrangement. From my perspective, this shift represents one of the most important developments in public administration. Government effectiveness today is often determined not by what a single agency can accomplish independently, but by how well governmental entities can coordinate their efforts. Wright's overlapping model emerged from this understanding and provides a framework for explaining how government negotiate, cooperate, and share responsibilities to achieve common policy goals. This slide illustrates the central concept of Wright's overlapping model of intergovernmental relations. Unlike traditional theories that viewed federal, state, and local governments are operating within separate spheres of authority, Wright argued that modern governance is characterized by shared authority, shared responsibilities, and continuous interaction among all levels of government. The overlapping circles in the diagram represents the reality that governmental responsibility frequently intersect. Federal, state, and local governments often participate in the same policy areas, although they may contribute different resources, expertise, or legal authority. Rather than function independently, these governmental entities must coordinate their efforts to achieve common objectives. One of the defining features of the model is shared authority. Wright recognized that authority is not concentrated in a single level of government. Instead, public policy is often developed and implemented through joint action involving multiple governmental actors. This is particularly evident in areas such as healthcare, emergency management, transportation, and environmental policy. This model emphasizes overlapping responsibilities. Because government frequently share policy responsibilities, collaboration becomes a necessity rather than an option. Information sharing, policy coordination, and resource sharing are essential components of successful intergovernmental relationships. Another important element is the role of negotiation. Wright argued that cooperation does not occur automatically. Governments often have different priorities, interests, and constraints. As a result, bargaining, compromise, and ongoing communication are necessary to resolve differences and advance shared policy goals. From my perspective, Wright's greatest contribution was recognizing that governance is fundamentally relational. Public administrators rarely succeed through authority alone. Instead, success depends on their ability to build partnership, coordinate across jurisdiction, and work collaboratively to address increasing, increasingly complex public problems. This insight helps explain why Wright's model remains highly relevant in contemporary public administration. This slide highlights the theoretical foundation that supports Wright's overlapping model of intergovernmental relations. These principles help explain why governments increasingly rely on collaboration rather than operating in isolation. The first foundation is shared authority. Wright argued that governmental power is dispersed among federal, state, and local governments rather than concentrated in a single level. While each level of government has certain constitutional responsibilities, many public issues require joint participation and shared decision making. This result reflects the reality that public problems often cross jurisdictional boundaries. The second foundation is overlapping responsibilities. In practice, multiple levels of government frequently become involved in the state policy areas. For example, healthcare, transportation, emergency management, and environmental protection often involve federal funding, state oversight, and local implementation. Because responsibilities overlap, coordination becomes essential to avoid duplication of effort and conflicting policies. A third foundation is the importance of collaboration. Rights view communication, partnership, and cooperative relationships as central components of effective governance. Public administrators often work across organizational and governmental boundaries to achieve policy objectives and deliver public services effectively. The final foundation is negotiation. Unlike traditional models that emphasize hierarchy and command, Wright's framework recognizes that policy implementation often depends on bargaining, compromise, and mutual adjustment among governmental actors. Kettle notes that successful governance increasingly depends on networks and collaborative relationships rather than direct control alone. From my perspective, these foundations remain highly relevant because they reflect how public administration actually function in the 21st century. Governments are interconnected, responsibilities are shared, and policy success often depend on the quality of relationships among participating organizations. Right model provides a practical framework of understanding these complex interactions and the collaborative nature of modern governance. This, uh, this slide demonstrates how Wright's overlapping model applies directly to public administration. One of the central ideas of the model is that effective governance depends on collaboration among multiple organizations and stakeholders rather than independent action by a single government entity. In today's environment, public administrators routinely work across organizational boundaries. Federal, state, and local agencies coordinate policies, share resources, and jointly deliver programs that affect citizens and communities. This type of collaboration has become increasingly important as public problems have grown more complex and interconnected. The model recognizes the important role of nonprofit organizations. Nonprofits often possess strong community relationships, specialized expertise, and local knowledge that government agencies may not have. Through partnership with public agencies, nonprofits help expand service delivery and improve community outcomes. Private sector organizations contribute valuable resources, innovation, technology, and operational expertise. Public-private partnerships have become common in such areas as infrastructure infrastructure development, healthcare delivery, information technology, and emergency response. These partnerships allow government to, to leverage additional capabilities while maintaining a focus on public needs. The importance of collaborations becomes especially evident during emergencies and public crises. Events such as natural disasters and disease outbreaks require coordinated action among government agencies, healthcare organizations, nonprofit groups, and private sector partners. No sector organization can effectively manage these challenges alone. From my perspective, this slide captures the practical significance of Wright's model. Successful public administration is no longer defined solely by governmental authority. Instead, it is increasingly measured by the ability to build relationships, coordinate resources, and create partnerships that produce meaningful results for citizens. Right model helps explain why collaboration has become one of the most essential leadership competencies in contemporary public administration. This diagram visually represents Deil Wright's overlapping model of intergovernmental relations. The overlapping circles illustrate how federal, state, and local government interact within shared policy spaces rather than operating independently. Wright argued that modern governance cannot be understood as a set of separate layers of government functioning in isolation. Instead, governmental entities continuously interact, share responsibilities, and collaborate to address public issues. The overlapping areas of the diagram represent shared authority, while each level of government possesses certain constitutional powers and responsibilities. Many policy issues require participation from multiple jurisdictions. As a result, authority is often distributed rather than concentrated at a single level of government. The model highlights the concept of shared policy spaces. Public issues such as healthcare, emergency management, transportation, education, and environmental protection frequently involve federal funding, state oversight, and local implementation. Because these responsibilities overlap, government must coordinate their efforts to achieve effective outcomes. Another important feature of the model is continuous interaction. Wright recognized that intergovernmental relations are dynamic rather than static. Governments regularly communicate, negotiate, exchange information, uh, and coordinate resources to address emerging challenges. These interactions help ensure that policies are implemented effectively across jurisdictions. Healthcare provides a useful example of this process. Federal agencies may establish regular regulations and funding programs. State government oversee implementation and compliance, and local organizations deliver services directly to communities. Similarly, during emergency management situations such as hurricanes, floods, or public health crises, federal, state, and local government must work together to coordinate resources, share information, and respond effectively. From a public administrator perspective, this model reflects the reality of contemporary governance. Public administrators rarely operate within a single governmental sphere. Instead, They work within networks of organizations that depend on cooperation, communication, shared decision making. Wright's model helps explain how these relationships function and why collaboration has become essential for addressing complex public challenges. Ultimately, the overlapping circles symbolize more than sheer authority. They represent the interconnected nature of modern governance and demonstrate that effective public administration depends on cooperation among all levels of government working towards common goal. Now that we have examined the foundations of Wright's overlapping model, the next question is how the model actually operates in practice. Wright argued that effective governance occurs through continuous interaction among federal, state, and local government rather than through isolated decision making. The process begins with shared authority. Although each level of government has specified constitutional responsibilities, many policy issues require participation from multiple governmental entities. Authority is therefore distributed rather than concentrated, creating a system of independence. As authority is shared, responsibility often interlap. Public administrators regularly encounter situations in which multiple agencies have responsibility for the same policy area. This overlap requires communication, coordination, and willingness to work together toward common objectives. Collaboration serves as a mechanism that connects these overlapping responsibilities rather than relying solely on hierarchy or formal authority. Governments frequently depend on partnership, joint planning, and cooperative problem solving. Wrights believe that collaboration is not simply beneficial, it is essential for addressing complex public challenges. Another important aspect of the model is the role of administrative networks. Public administrators often act as coordinators, facilitators, and negotiators who help align priorities, resolve disagreements, and maintain productive working relations across jurisdiction. These networks help transform policy goals into practical action. The diagram at the bottom of the slide illustrates this process. Effective implementation begins with the communication and of information sharing. As government coordinate resources and prioritize, they are better positioned to develop collaborative solutions. Those collaborative efforts ultimately lead to more effective implementation and improved public outcomes. From a public administration perspective, one of the most valuable insights of Wright's model is that successful governance is a process rather than an event. Strong outcomes are achieved when government consistently communicate, coordinate, and collaborate across organizational boundaries. In many cases, the quality of those relationships determines whether public policies succeed or fail. One reason Wright's overlapping model remains influential is that it reflects the realities of modern governance. Unlike traditional models that assume clear division of authority, Wright recognizes that federal, state, and local government frequently share responsibilities and must work together to address complex public problems. The first major strength of the model is that it accurately reflects how government operates today. Issues such as public health, emergency management, transportation, and environmental protection often require coordination among multiple governmental entities. The model acknowledges that no single level of government possesses all of the resources, expertise, or authority needed to solve these challenges independently. A second strength is its emphasis on collaboration. Right viewed intergovernmental relationships are ongoing partnerships rather than hierarchical structures. This collaborative approach encourages communication, trust, and shared problem solving, which can improve policy implementation and public service delivery. The model provides flexibility because authority is shared government governments can adapt to changing circumstances and negotiate solutions that fit local conditions. This flexibility is especially important when addressing emerging issues that do not fit neatly within existing jurisdictional boundaries. Finally, the model promotes coordination among governmental actors by encouraging governments to work together. Resources can be utilized more efficiently, duplication of effort can be reduced, and policy outcomes can be improved. Christensen and Weiss argue that contemporary governance increasingly depends on these collaborative arrangements because public challenges are often interconnected and require collective action. From a public administration perspective, I believe the greatest strength of Wright's model it is recognition that effective governance depends on relationships. Success is often determined not by the authority of a single organization, but the ability of multiple organizations to coordinate their efforts toward a common goal. Although Wright's overlapping model offers many advantages, it is important to recognize that the model is not without limitations. Like any theoretical framework, it presents challenges that public administrators must manage carefully. One criticism involves accountability. When authority and responsibilities are shared among multiple governmental entities, it can become difficult to determine who is ultimately responsible for policy, decisions, and outcomes. This lack of clarity may com- complicate performance evaluation and public accountability. A second challenge involves power imbalances. Although the model emphasizes collaboration, not all participants possess the same level of resources, influence, or political authority. Larger governmental entities or organizations with greater resources may dominate decision-making process, potentially limiting, limiting the influence of smaller jurisdictions or community stakeholders. Administrative complexity is another concern. Coordinating activities across multiple levels of government often requires extensive communication, negotiation, and oversight. While collaboration can improve outcomes, it can also increase bureaucracy and slow decision-making process. The model may also create fiscal tensions. Shared programs frequently depend on grants, costs, sharing agreements, and competing budget priorities. When funding becomes limited, disagreements may arise regarding responsibilities, resource allocation, and long-term program sustainability. Despite these challenges, most scholars do not view these weaknesses as grounds for rejecting Wright's model. Instead, They highlight areas that require effective leadership, communication, and accountability mechanism. From my perspective, this the model limitations reinforce the importance of strong intergovernmental relationships and skilled public administrators who can balance competing interests while maintaining a focus on the public good. Ultimately, understanding the strengths and weaknesses of the rights model provides a more complete understanding of how collaborative governance functions in the practice. This slide highlights how rights overlapping model continues to shape public administration in the 21st century. While the model was developed several decades ago, its core principles remain highly relevant because many of today's public challenges extend beyond the authority and resources of any single level of government. One example is disaster response. When natural disasters occur, federal, states, and local government must coordinate force, personnel, funding, equipment, and emergency services. Agencies such as FEMA often work alongside state emergency management offices and local force responders to protect lives, restore services, and support community recovery efforts. This type of coordinated response reflects the overlapping authority described by Wright. The model is evident in public health administration. Recent public health emergencies demonstrate the importance of collaboration among federal agencies, state health departments, and local healthcare providers and community organizations. Effective responses require information sharing, coordinated planning, and joint implementation of public initiatives. Infrastructure management provides another example. Transportation system, bridges, water systems, and public facilities often rely on funding and oversight from multiple levels of government. Successful infrastructure projects require cooperation among governmental partners throughout the planning, financing, and constructing and maintenance phase. Environmental regulations similarly illustrates the importance of intergovernmental collaboration. Issues such as water quality, air pollution, climate resilience, and land conservation frequently cross jurisdictional boundaries. Addressing these challenges require coordinated policies, shared resources, long-term partnership, and among governmental entities. From a public administration perspective, these examples demonstrate why rights model remain valuable today. Complex public problems but rarely have simple solutions, and no single organization possesses all of the authority, expertise, or resources needed to address them independently. Rights framework help explain how collaborative governance enables the government to combine their strength, share responsibility, and achieve outcomes that will be difficult to accomplish alone. Ultimately, the continued relevance of rights model lies in its recognition that effective governance depends on cooperation. As public challenges becomes increasingly interconnected, the ability to work across jurisdiction and organizational boundaries become essential for achieving sustainable and meaningful public outcomes. As we conclude our discussion on rights overlapping model, it is important to recognize that many of its core principles align closely with effective public administration and biblical teaching regarding leadership, stewardship, and service. Through this presentation, we have seen that modern governance depends on shared authority, collaboration, and independence among governmental entities. Wright's model demonstrates that public challenges are rarely solved by a single organization acting alone. Instead, effective governance required cooperation, communication, and a committed to share goals. Ultimately, Wright's overlapping model reminds us that effective governance depends on collaboration, shared responsibility, and strong partnership. As public challenges continue to grow in it grow in complexity, the principles of cooperation, stewardship, and service remain essential for creating stronger communities and advancing the common good.